Water here. Is that okay? Now will become increasingly clear. I'm going to be over here on the right.
Okay, that's fine with me.
That's okay. This is the level of my technical expertise, but I can't get it on my neck.
Do you want one, Ian?
Thank you. Thanks. Good evening, everybody. I'm Charles Royer, Director of the Institute of Politics, and welcome to this forum on the future of the Republican Party. It may be said that never was such a collection of Republican Party power gathered in one room in Cambridge, except for that moment in 1988 when Marvin Kalb hosted the 1988 Republican Party candidates in the primary, and you may remember that moment. But tonight, without the Kennedy School even shaking or falling down, we have the Republican Party represented here tonight in many of its parts, and we're going to get right to it. First, let me quickly introduce, and I'm sorry, but under-introduce our participants. First, Vin Weber, who is a former 12-year congressman from Minnesota, 1988 chair of Kemp for president, co-chair of the Bush Quayle re-election campaign. After leaving the House, he formed something called Empower America with Jack Kemp and other Republican leaders. Sitting next to Vin Weber is Frank Luntz, whom many of you know as a fellow at the Institute of Politics. Frank runs his own polling and survey firm and has been a very active participant in the Institute of Politics and the Kennedy School, and we've been delighted to have him with us. And he is instrumental in organizing this evening for you. Next to Frank is Ralph Reed, who is a veteran Republican campaign consultant, former executive director of the College Republican National Committee, now executive director of the Christian Coalition, an organization with 350,000 members and 700 chapters across the country. Sitting next to Ralph is Mickey Edwards, former 8-term congressman from the state of Oklahoma, who has just joined the Kennedy School faculty. In his career in the Congress, Mickey was 4th-ranking Republican in the leadership, chairing the House Republican Policy Committee. Sitting next to Mickey is Bay Buchanan, who's been here at the Kennedy School recently for the Campaign Managers Conference, representing the campaign of Pat Buchanan, her brother. Bay Buchanan is now Executive Vice Chairman of American Cause Foundation, an educational organization. She was treasurer of the 80 and 84 Reagan campaign, and then treasurer of the United States. Sitting next to Bay is Ann Stone, founder of Republicans for Choice, and of Ann Stone & Associates, a direct response marketing firm. She's been active in Republican Party politics and campaigns. And sitting next to me is Haley Barber, who will open this evening for us. He's a Mississippian who served Ronald Reagan as director of the White House Office of Political Affairs, director of his state's Republican Party, active in campaigns for at least 4 Republican presidents. He ran for the U.S. Senate in 1982 against John Stennis. Since 1984, he has been National Committeeman for Mississippi. He was elected chair of the Republican National Committee in January of 1993. What they said about Haley Barber on his election to that high party post, the press said a superb choice. He's well suited to the task of ensuring that the national GOP accommodate the diversity of the party that led to its national victories. He was nominated as a candidate who could sit across from Bryant Gumbel and not let Bryant Gumbel get the best of him. The Boston Globe...
That doesn't go for Katie Couric, unfortunately.
The Boston Globe said he's a conservative lawyer from Dixie with a sense of humor and a passion for politics. Washington Post said Republicans like Jack Kemp have already shown that tolerance and openness do not have to compromise conservative principles. Perhaps a Paul like Mr. Barber is just the right sort to convince others in his party that this is a formula worth considering. And John Chafee from Rhode Island said, he's a room for everybody guy. That's his message, and that's a winning message. Tonight, we will test these statements about Mr. Barber by bringing together some of the diversity of the party here in the forum to talk about the future of the party, which has been defined by the Clinton election as the party of the loyal opposition. What else the party is, we'll leave to our panel and to you in the question and answer session. And may I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being with us tonight, and please lead us off. Would you please welcome these distinguished guests?
Thank you very much. I am glad to be here. I rarely come to Boston without an interpreter. Frank said that this was a very diverse group that I'd be meeting with, and I knew that was true immediately when I looked out and I saw a couple of Republicans. I am glad to be here, and I'm glad to have an opportunity to be with you. This is one of the most prestigious universities in the world, and this is one of the most prestigious programs about government and public affairs and, of course, politics. To me, let me just say, policy is politics, and politics is policy. That I think what we as a party, and either party for that matter, what we believe in is what causes people to work on our behalf, to seek office under our banner, to contribute money to our candidates and to the various institutions that make up the Republican Party. So as we're here today, and as you ask questions or whatever, I would like for you to understand that that is the cornerstone of what we as a party have to be about, and that is we have to be a party that stands for something. My goal as chairman of this party, as I put it to the 165 members of the Republican National Committee who elected me, is that I have the first goal of regaining our position in this country as a party of principle, a party of ideas, and a party of inclusion. That the way to have a party that's a real political party is to allow people to participate. In fact, to make them participate. To try to push the power in the Republican Party away from Washington. Where there is a tendency when you're in the White House, particularly for 12 years, for there to be concentrations of power. It's interesting, Ronald Reagan, who used to be my boss, was elected President of the United States to decentralize our government. But during the 12 years we were in the White House, we centralized our party. And I said, and it is my goal to redirect the attention, the energy, and the resources of the Republican Party away from Washington out to the states, where elections really are won and lost. And they're really won and lost by people, and won and lost by people who believe in our candidates and believe in what we stand for. I didn't know when I got elected chairman that within a couple of weeks, Bill Clinton would introduce his economic plan, which has done more than anything I could have done to focus attention on the difference between Republicans and Democrats. That we've, thank you very much. You know, Mark Twain said, "Don't applaud, it only encourages them." But just feel free. Don't. And I thought you were doing pretty well with that introduction too. Well, I don't know why you stopped. But you know, it's very interesting. President Clinton has proposed an economic plan that is a government growth plan. It's $360 billion of new taxes, $295 billion of net tax increase, $200 billion of new spending in the name of deficit reduction. We have a plan that produces $3.31 of tax increases for every dollar of spending cuts. We have a plan where all of the spending cuts come from the defense side, that domestic spending actually goes up over $300 billion over the course of this plan and contributes not 1 cent to deficit reduction. All the deficit reduction comes from tax increases, the largest tax increase in history, defense spending cuts, and magic asterisks, you know, that if we do these things, we assume that interest rates will go down and we'll save $64 billion. But there is no domestic spending cut. The reason it's been very helpful to the Republicans is we don't think we have a $320 billion deficit in this country because we tax too little. We think it's because we spend too much. And I think the average American agrees with us, and to me, more importantly, the facts agree with us. Since 1981, when President Reagan, I think, appointed Bay Treasurer of the United States, and if you're lucky, you can get a dollar bill that she signed. If you're real lucky, you can get 100. But when Reagan came to the White House and he instituted his tax cut in 1981, it actually went into effect the next year. From 81 to 1993, federal tax revenues went up 94%. The deficit skyrocketed because spending went up 120%. And we've all seen in your lifetime and mine that every time the government raises taxes, we just spend more money. Since I was born in 1947, for every dollar that the federal government has increased taxes, we've increased spending $1.59. And we've seen it in the 1990 budget deal, the 1982 budget deal, and all the way back. And that's why this has been a great opportunity for us as Republicans, that we've had this issue that really lets us emphasize what unites us. The fact that we are the party of small government, of low taxes, of less spending, of fewer government regulation, being confronted by a president whose party controls both houses of Congress that has a big government package of record tax increases, big increases in spending, and surely to be followed by great increases in federal regulation. It is a good time for us, and I think importantly, our leadership in Congress has not only come out against what is in President Clinton's package, but have proposed specific, positive alternatives. On the House side, the Republican leadership supported a bill to cut the deficit $429 billion without raising anybody's taxes. It's crafted by John Kasich and the Republicans on the Budget Committee, and of course it was voted down by a near party line vote. When the budget resolution went over to the Senate side, Senator Dole, with 35 co-sponsors, introduced a bill to cut the deficit $460 billion, again without raising anybody's taxes. What he said was, let's eliminate all of President Clinton's new taxes. Let's eliminate all his spending increases. Let's accept virtually all his spending cuts and cut spending another $260 billion to reduce the deficit more than President Clinton's package would reduce the deficit, but again, without any tax increase that would threaten to smother the economic recovery that we have going in this country, but which has not yet reached every area of the country or every sector of the economy. It's a real opportunity to see the difference between what Republicans think we should do with government and our belief that the private sector really is the engine of economic growth in America, and what the Democrats who control the White House and the Congress are trying to pass, which is, as I say, a government growth package, not an economic growth package. It's within that context and during this time that we are here to be with you today. And as I say, I think it's a great time. I think it's a great time for our party, which suffered a serious defeat in 1992 at the top of the ticket, but actually had a tremendous amount of success down the ticket. We took control of a number of legislatures. We picked up 10 seats in the House while losing the White House, which is very, very unusual. And since then, we have had 21 special elections for the legislature in the United States, 4 that were vacancies that had been held by Republicans, which we kept all 4. The other 17, which were Democratic vacancies, of which we've won 8, for a net gain of 8. And I think that simply speaks to the fact that it is a good time. We're now in the midst of several special elections for Congress and the Senate, and I think the political verdict on President Clinton's economic plan is seen there too, in that not one single Democrat running for Congress or running for the United States Senate is running on President Clinton's economic plan. In fact, the only Democrat running in a special election this spring who has a vote in the Congress, Bob Kruger, cast his vote repeatedly against President Clinton's economic plan. So I'm glad to be here, and I think it's an auspicious time, and I'm glad to be here with these people who are all my friends and all who make major contributions to the Republican Party and what we're about. And with that, let me shut down this filibuster. There are probably 60 votes out here for me to stop, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Charlie.
Those of you who would like to ask questions, we need you to go to these microphones, two of them here on the main floor, and you can do that now because we want to get you into this just as soon as possible. I will recognize people here, and of course, you all may jump in as you wish. Let me just begin with a question that you talked only about economics, basically, in your open, and let me just begin with a question on those economic issues. Nancy Kassenbaum, a Republican from Kansas, said in a recent piece that we, quote, "we have betrayed our conservative roots and shredded our basic message in writing on the Republican Party and what it needs to do now and in the 90s. She said the party of fiscal responsibility in the 80s willingly exchanged tax and spend for borrow and spend. Pursuing defense buildup, we cannot now afford to build down, and in the process quadrupled the national debt." Her sense being, of course, that you're not credible on the economic issue after 12 years of leadership in the White House, and that you're now torn with these other issues, these social issues, these issues of diversity and a lack of inclusion in the party, and your anchor, your economic issue, is not credible.
You want me to answer that, or?
Sure, anybody can jump in.
Well,
Vin,
let me just say, and then, because I didn't want to do all the talking, I'll defer to Vin. You know, the fact of the matter is, and I have a feeling that Senator Kassenbaum's remarks there are taken out of context.
Out of the Washington Post.
Well, it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
But she wrote it.
The fact of the matter is that while Ronald Reagan was president, I think he would tell you that the greatest disappointment that he had was his inability to cut spending. The fact of the matter is, we talked about how taxes went up during the 80s. The fact is that the defense budget has gone down in real terms every year since 1986, every single year. The trouble is that domestic spending continued to increase at a far greater rate than tax revenues did or than our economy did. And when I was at the White House, I can remember very well every time President Reagan would send up a budget to stop that or to cut back on that, the Washington Post would announce on the front page the next day, dead on arrival. Reagan budget, dead on arrival. Now, I will tell you that Ronald Reagan would like to be able to say today that we got control of spending, but he didn't. I think it is interesting to note, and I'll turn this over to Vin, the one year that we saw very significant deficit reduction in the 1980s was FY97, beginning in 96, and FY87, beginning in 86, for one reason. Taxes didn't go up. Spending increased less than 1% that year. It was the first year of the Graham-Rudman bills before they figured out how to get around it. The deficit was cut from $222 billion to $146 billion, by a third in 1 year, by one device. And that was essentially, we froze federal spending. That is why today Republicans are totally committed to deficit reduction by cutting spending and not by raising taxes.
I would only add, first of all, I just want to just make a comment. And after being here for a couple of hours and listening to all these jokes about liberal Harvard, liberal Massachusetts, liberal Boston, when I came into the reception earlier, somebody said, "How does it feel to be in the liberal capital of the world?" And I was a little bit confused because I'm not returning to Minnesota till Friday. So I did a joint appearance with Haley's counterpart, Dave Wilhelm, the Democrat National Chairman, the other day, and we talked back and forth about the Reagan years, and he's, beating up on Reagan and the horrible excesses of the 80s, blah, blah. I said, what is the real objective? When we get done with the Clinton administration, what do you really want to have accomplished in the American people? He says, that's easy. We're going to cut the deficit in half as a percent of GDP, and we're going to create 10 million new jobs. I said, oh, you want to do what Reagan did? That's what Reagan did. I mean, we can criticize the economic policies of the 80s. I don't think they were perfect. I agree with the notion that we did not control spending enough. But the objective of economic policy, is not deficit reduction. The objective of economic policy is an economy which produces certain conditions under which people live. expanding employment and by definition reduced unemployment, rising incomes, and some American sense of equity that those incomes are rising at the bottom, or at least giving you the opportunity to rise at the bottom as well as at the top. Now, if deficit reduction is an essential part of that, and I agree that it is, that's fine. When you decide you are going to define your economic policy in terms of deficit reduction rather than in terms of the conditions under which people live, I think you can make the horrible mistake that this administration has made. The tax increases, Bob Eisner, former chairman of the National Association of Economists, American Economic Association, liberal Democrat economist, recently critiqued the Clinton administration's economic program and said it was going to produce lower economic growth. You know, you simply have to ask the country, is this what we really want? Is this the economic program we've embraced? We think that America will be better because America's poorer? America will feel better because less people are working? Even if you do achieve the objective of a deficit reduction at the expense of higher unemployment, lower incomes, lower output? I think not. I mean, the fact is that the Republican Party, grappling with the Democratic Congress for most of those years, for all those years in the House, did a pretty good job of keeping inflation under control, expanding output and expanding employment and seeing incomes rise. And the parts of our program that we wanted to accomplish but could not because of Democratic control of the Congress are really what we ought to be achieving today.
In fact, these guys are being really polite. I don't know if you remember back then in '81 when the Reagan tax and budget cuts were being passed, and we read every night in the newspaper and saw every day on the television how Reagan was throwing the old and the poor out into the street, and these budget cuts were the most horrible things that anybody had ever seen, and the country was going to go down the tubes because we were going to cut spending. And it was bureaucrats within the agencies, government agencies, yelling and screaming, saying programs are going to be destroyed and the world is coming to an end because of these budget cuts. We weren't even cutting spending, we were cutting the rate of the increase of spending, and they squealed at that. And you know, I firmly believe that the Republicans never had a chance to really do the spending cuts that they wanted to do because we didn't control the Congress. You know, as you said, the budgets came dead on arrival. But I remember so vividly, you know, when the attempts were made early on, and they acted like we were going to destroy the world.
Let's address some facts here. The reason the Republicans lost last year was not about Reagan years so much as it was about the fact that the Democrats were able to take the tax and spend label off their own necks and stamp it right on the Republican Party. And so we went into that election saying, listen, we're the party for less government and less taxes, and everybody said there is no credibility whatsoever, and we're running against a Democrat who ran as a conservative on fiscal policy, who kept repeating the fact that he understands balanced budgets because he balanced his budget down there in Arkansas, and that is why we lost. So it's all nice to talk about what happened during the last 12 years. The reason we are now unified and stronger than we have been in years is because the man in the White House is an uninspired liberal who is a tax and spender, and it's coming out true. He is for more taxes, more spending, and he doesn't care about the debt. That's what the American people care about, and Ross Perot is going to remind them for the next 4 years. And so this man is in danger now of any kind of success in his own administration, and as a result, the Republicans are beginning to be able to take that label back as someone who is against increased taxes, a party against increased size of government, and we have some possibility here for really doing extremely well next year in off-year elections and also being very strong in the next presidential election.
Charlie, let me interject a thought. I agree with everything that has been said. I don't think it's relevant to the question of the future of the Republican Party, which is what our basic topic is here. You know, the real question about whether the Republican Party has a future or does not have a future depends on a couple of things. One is how you define have a future. What is have a future? We talked about this. I was talking with a friend at dinner tonight about that, and the question came down to whether Bill Clinton, who is temporarily the President of the United States, question became whether Bill Clinton is doing things so wrong that we will win the White House next time. I think whether or not we win the White House is not the definition of whether there is a future for the Republican Party. And I think to address this question realistically, we have to honestly assess where the Republican Party is. Ronald Reagan's presidency is defined, and I thought he was a wonderful president. I supported him on virtually all that he did. His presidency now is defined by two things. It's defined by Iran-Contra in foreign policy, where the president had a policy in dealing with Central America which he was not able to carry out because the majority of the people in the Congress did not support his policy. President Reagan goes down in history as the deficit president, champion deficit builder of all time, because he had proposals to cut spending, but the Congress did not follow through. And we are obsessed with who's president. I mean, I would tell you, I would willingly let Bill Clinton or whoever his Democratic successor might be president of the United States for the next 40 years if you allow me to control the Congress of the United States for the next 40 years. And Republicans have so narrowly defined what it is that our goal is that we fail to understand the depth of the problem. The problem is not one that we lost the election last year. The last time Republicans controlled the House of Representatives, Dwight Eisenhower was just beginning to be president of the United States. And every 2 years, we talk about it. Once when I was driving through France, I was pulled over in a speed trap. It was one of those things where you're driving around a mountain road and you can't help but go over the center line. And I was pulled over by the French gendarmes, and they started talking to me about what I had done wrong and how much I needed to pay and how much my fine would be, which was all great, but I don't understand a word of French, and I told them that. And so they began to speak to me louder in French. And it seems to me that's what we're doing. We have not learned the basic lessons about how you win. Sometimes when I make this point, people say, yes, but the reason we're not the majority is because of gerrymandering. The people who do the gerrymandering did not appoint themselves to the state legislature. They were elected by the voters. And so I hope that as we go on here, we will address the fundamental problems of why the American people are not electing Republicans to office. And it goes well beyond whether Bill Clinton's doing a good job right now or not.
Well, let's pursue that a little bit. Why are you not winning at the congressional district level? I mean, Bay just said that the party is together now, and it never has been before. When you read the papers, all you read about is this division over abortion, the religious right. The party is torn asunder by these pressures that really mean something to people in the neighborhood and in the congressional district. They're not talking about big war and peace issues that you elect the president for. They're talking about their state legislatures, and they're talking about somebody they send to the Congress.
But I respectfully, I mean, I agree with your analysis to a point, but I respectfully think that it extends to abortion as well. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why we haven't done better down the ticket. A big part of it, though, and I think perhaps the dominant part of it, is we have won the presidency up until recently because the Republican Party sort of secured the ground on the macro issues. We were the party of effective foreign policy, national security, and good macroeconomic policy. But the fact is, people vote for Congress, and certainly it's true down the ticket in state legislatures, not for those reasons. They don't elect a congressman or a legislator to conduct foreign policy, or even to control inflation or conduct macroeconomic policy. They may well elect a congressman or a state legislator or a mayor or a county commissioner because they are concerned about a housing problem in their district or an educational issue or crime or the poverty in the inner city or the rural areas or whatever it may be. And that whole zone, if you will, is one that we have forfeited to the Democrats, unfortunately, throughout both the Reagan and the Bush years as well as before that. And that's, in my view, that is one of our great failings as a party. Reagan, I think, did an historic job of realigning the thinking of the country about the role of the Republican Party in terms of foreign and national security policy and macroeconomic policy, which gave us what we thought was a lock on the presidency until we screwed it up. But we did not convince people that there was a reason to vote for Republicans if they were concerned, if they wanted government to have an activist role in education, housing, healthcare, et cetera, but not necessarily the role that the Democrats had played since the 1930s. And rather than have no role at all, people said, I'm going to vote for the Democrats. Republicans have nothing to say on those issues. That is still something, in my view, that we have to remedy before you have an opportunity to be truly competitive up and down the ticket.
Well, and I also think that even though we say we're federalists in the sense that we believe in a traditional role for state and local government, most of the power being vested, as Jefferson said, at the level closest to the people, because that kept government more responsive, it kept government more honest, it kept government in the hands of citizen legislators instead of professional politicians, even though we articulate that, and I think we do believe it. As Haley was saying earlier, we have tended as a party within our inner councils to operate very differently. We have operated almost as royalists. We have 3 national committees in the Senatorial Committee, the Congressional Committee, and the RNC that raise far more money, and I would argue have a much more professional and capable staff than the Democrats do. But once you start getting to the state party level, the county party level, the union hall, the precinct captain, and that's where we begin to get weak. And I don't know what the entire answer to that is, but I do find in not only Republican circles, but in conservative circles, that there's a sense in which people believe that if you can just elect the right man or woman president, you could solve everything. What we're finding is that that is not true, but I would also argue that that is changing. It's gradual, it's going to take a long time, but in Georgia, for example, the Republicans in 1992 went from 36 to 52 in the House and from 11 to 17 in the Senate. They control the Wisconsin State Senate for the first time since 1974. They've taken all 3 branches of the Michigan state government for the first time since 1962. And I could go on with many other examples where there have been dozens and I think the national pickup in terms of state legislators for the Republican Party in 1992, I believe, was 76 nationally, and there were a lot of cases where it was very significant. So I think that is changing.
Let's get some others in here. Yes?
What geographic/demographic trends do you see emerging in the membership of the party, and what are your goals for that?
Demographically, one of the big problems is that the people here who are under the age of 24 didn't vote for us this last time. In fact, not that many people here probably voted for us the last time. We didn't reach out to them. I mean, I think George Bush went onto a college campus once or twice, and that's because he got the wrong directions when he was driving to some senior citizen's home. Or maybe he was going to visit Admiral Stockdale, I'm not sure. Yes, this is why people like me should be seen and not heard.
That's why people like me should sit next to people like you.
He looks like my dad, too.
You win.
It concerns me very much. The Republican Party, and I know this was a surprise to people in 1972, and I'm sure that there are people involved in the Kennedy School that put this together, giving the 18-year-olds the right to vote. The fact is the 18 to 21-year-old block has been the best block for the Republican Party nationally and statewide since 1976. And we lost them. We were creamed by Bill Clinton. And we have no ability right now to reach out for them because we've not addressed you. We've not talked to you. We don't appear often enough on your college campuses. We don't address the concerns that you have just as you're getting out of school. We don't appear to be providing opportunities for you. And so that's block number 1. Block number 2 has to do with the African American vote, and even more particularly the Hispanic vote. And I'm thinking also of the Cubans, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans. The Republican Party does have policies that do address these people, but we never talk about them. The group that Vin Weber is involved with, Jack Kemp's and Bill Bennett's Empower America, has tried to reach out. But we're not talking to them, and they should not be voting for us. I mean, with all due respect to the Republican Party, if we don't address them, if we don't start listening to them and then start speaking to them, we don't deserve for them to vote for us, and the Democrats do listen. And I'd say the final group that we have a problem with now are these Perot people, and there are 19 million of them. And we just finished, my company, doing some focus groups. And I don't know if there are many people who voted for Perot. Statistically, there should not be more than maybe half a dozen people in this room that voted for him. But 19 million people out there did. And these people do not like Bill Clinton's economic package. They think that Bill Clinton's deficit program is a fraud, but they think that the Republicans are obstructionist. And that's because we've not, again, gotten the message out about where we stand on taxes and where we stand on the budget. And that's a communication problem. It's not a policy problem. And if the Republican Party can deal with those three groups, man, we're going to kick ass in '96.
But can I add one thing, Charlie? That it's not entirely true that it's only a communications message. In addressing some of the problems, for example, as Vin mentioned, one of the things that really shocked me after the election, when the American people had said that they chose Bill Clinton, even though it was a minority vote, Clinton gathered a group of people together to address economic policy. The Republican response to that was not to call another meeting of other people to address economic policy. The Republican response was to criticize the media for broadcasting the Clinton meeting. And I mean, that's a totally unacceptable approach. So it does go beyond just communication.
Yes, sir.
What I wanted to ask was, as a person who considers himself a moderate Republican, and referring to Babe Buchanan, who referred that we lost this election in November because of economic issues, and who considers himself a Republican for economic issues, where is the winning issue for the Republicans? If we deal with economics, we seem to have 100% cooperation. We all are together. We see this in the Senate, where all Republicans are supporting this filibuster. Where is it? We divide on the social issues. How is that going to win anything for the Republican Party when most people, I would consider myself in that, probably differ on abortion rights or gay rights, and that's where the party splinters. So if we stuck with the economic agenda, it would seem that we would win. But if we get into the social issues thing where, you've got the Southerners believe certain things, people in New England believed other things, as, all politics is local and things. We have very different opinions on that, and that's where we're going to divide. Why don't we just stick with this economic agenda and get 100% cooperation and leave the abortion issue and the gay rights issue to the local people? I don't see where I don't see where getting involved in social issues is a winning issue.
Let me respond in two ways. Number one is, the economy is only an issue if Bill Clinton gives it to us. I mean, if Bill Clinton puts together, turns around some of these things, starts cutting spending, and backs off those taxes, gets those spending cuts under control, then says to the American people, listen, we still have a debt, I've done my best, I think we need some taxes, the people are going to support him, and if we have a strong economy 4 years from now, your position would say that we don't have a race, all right? Now, if the economy is in trouble, Bill Clinton is in serious trouble, and that will be the number one concern. And that's what we should talk about, all right, nationally. However, as a national party, there are critical issues that we face on the social side. And if we, as was introduced early by Haley, really are a party that has beliefs, that are willing to state them out there, this is where we stand, come and join us, this is where we want to take this nation, you're not going to agree with everything. I mean, even on the economy, there's really strong free traders in the Republican Party, and there's some fair traders very, very strong in the Republican Party. That's an issue where it's going to have to be resolved. It happens to be a difficult issue for both parties. So we never expect everybody to say, this is it, we agree with everything, we're going to sign up, any more than the American people signed up with Ronald Reagan because they agreed with everything. But the major issues is what you're going to get behind, and those are the ones that will be the national issues 4 years from now. We can't guarantee they're going to be the economy, but we should never walk away from our beliefs at all. We should establish them, state them, welcome everybody, say if you disagree with us on this, that's fine, but this is where we stand. We are a party of principle. We're going to stand on those principles. If you disagree, go to the other party and talk to them about it.
Except I would say that the safest way is not to frame around the economy per se, and it should not be tax or no tax. It's more fundamental than that. We were founded and remain, or are supposed to remain, the party of limited government, the party of individual freedom and individual responsibility. That is a core. That's where the tax issue comes in. We believe in less taxes because we don't believe there should be as much government as Bill Clinton wants. And he has made it extremely clear, and whether the economy gets better or not, he has made it clear the difference between the Republican Party and the Democrat Party is one of less government versus more. He has stated very clearly they want an activist government. They want to prove that government can be well managed. That's a pretty scary proposition. They haven't been able to do it so far. I don't know how they think they can do it now. And in fact, it was interesting because one of the media commentators said, Alice Rivlin, I don't understand his budget person. I don't understand why you guys don't go for a freeze on spending and a freeze on employees and maybe even cut back 10% across all the different departments. What's the problem? She said, very telling. She said, oh, we can't do that. There's going to be so much for them to do. We're going to need more people. That is very telling. They believe in government interference of all sorts.
And
the party really could reclaim that position.
Isn't
There's
it,
one
isn't it
problem.
on this core issue that you just laid out that the party has one of its most significant difficulties? Because on the core, on the economy, you stand for less government and less intrusion, more individual rights and liberties. And on the abortion issue, the government, the big government, from where the president sits, is intrusive and in that issue.
Well, that's where people fail to understand at least our position, and that's one of the reasons Frank didn't touch on one of the groups that did walk away, and that was women. You know, we have a situation right now where 42% of the women in the country identify themselves as Democrats, and only 27% identify themselves as Republicans. We had 28% of Republican women not vote for the ticket. And right now, it is over the issue of individual rights. You're right, that it hurts when you try to go to women and say, well, we're the party of less government. We're the party that believes in individual rights. It does fight the program. That doesn't mean that we should become a copycat of the Democrat Party on the issue of choice. In fact, my group's never advocated that.
What will happen to your party on this issue?
I will tell you the very simple model of what will happen to our party on this issue. In Georgia last year, after the November election, because of the peculiar law that they have in Georgia that you must get a majority to be elected to statewide office, they had a runoff for United States Senator. The Republican candidate was Paul Coverdell, pro-choice, had defeated a pro-life Republican in the Republican primary to win the Republican nomination. Paul is a conservative by national standards, but clearly he is the least conservative Republican senator we've ever elected from the Deep South. He will tell you today that he could not have been elected to the United States Senate without the enthusiastic support of the pro-life people, of the Christian Coalition, of Pat Robertson supporters, because even though they disagreed with him on abortion, they felt like he was the better candidate by far, that he was the better person. And so they went out and they worked their tails off for Paul Coverdell, and he got elected United States Senator by about 1% of the vote. I think you're going to see that's the model. I used to work for Ronald Reagan when I was at the White House, and Ronald Reagan used to say some words to live by, and that's that a fellow that agrees with you 80% of the time is your friend and ally, who's not some 20% traitor. And that's the situation that we see in our party on a lot of issues. Abortion's not the only one. But we can't let abortion be the threshold issue of republicanism. It's not a litmus test. I'm pro-life, but there are millions of pro-choice Republicans, just as good Republicans as I. And it's silly to think that in a party that's big enough to elect the President of the United States or a governor of Massachusetts, that everybody's going to agree on everything. We just have to emphasize the things that unite us, understand that we're not going to always agree. Look, I grew up in the South when Martin Luther King and Jim Eastland were both Democrats. They agreed on virtually nothing. And I will tell you, Bill Weld and Pat Buchanan agree on more than they disagree on. And so managing our coalition is a whole lot easier than some people in the press would like to portray it as being.
Can I make an addition to that?
Let me step in here because I can't let stay on the table here, remain on the table some of these comments. Charlie has outlined abortion very well for Ann, so let me explain it from the other point of view. It has nothing to do with federal intrusion whatsoever. In the Constitution of the United States, there is some language about protecting the life and liberty of our citizens, and that has nothing to do with intrusion. It has a lot to do with the pro-life position, though. Secondly, I agree with Haley. There's, and in our party's history, there's been an attempt by pro-lifers, pro-choicers, as well as the media has played into this, that the party has been exclusive. Now, pro-choice Republicans have been extremely successful in our party, have been welcomed, they've been promoted, they've been supported by conservatives. Often we do battle in primaries and the pro-choice one wins and we all get together. I was out there helping Pete Wilson a couple of years ago. I mean, that's what you do. We try to win our primaries, we lose some, we win some, and then we move on. But there is going to be a major problem in this party if there's an attempt to take the pro-life language out of the platform. Now, as long as it remains in there, it is not a national issue. It is not a voting issue in the, I should say, let me clarify that. It is not a voting issue in national politics. It's very few people will vote one way or the other because of that, and that has been proved true in this last election. However, if you take away that language, What you're saying to the people in this country who do believe that's life is that we are not willing as a party to stand up for that unborn child, and you will have a third party. They will not have two parties, and only two parties, that aren't willing to stand up. You will have a third party that will stand up for the pro-life, and that would be the most damaging thing the Republicans could do.
The point is that it is about individual intrusion. See, the majority of women out there and the majority of people that are pro-choice, and this is something that's never quite registered with you, it's not, well, first that we are the majority of the party, but secondly, the majority doesn't see it as a question of abortion. In fact, again, the overriding tide in the United States is to be personally against abortion, to want abortion discouraged, but they don't want government involved. And for women, it is a matter of control. In fact, Sandra Day O'Connor said it very well when she wrote in her opinion on Casey. She said, in order for women to participate equally in today's society, they have to have control over their lives. That's what it is. That's what it is for people. I think that we could work together. You and I actually could work together on language that we'd probably agree on in terms of ways that abortion could be curtailed and lessened by taking away the need for the abortion in the first place. And that would be much more constructive and much more Republican in the approach to solving that as a problem, if you see it as a problem, than the way the party currently is. So it's not a matter of goal, because I think we share the goal. It's a matter of how you get to the goal. And I think we actually could work together on common ground language that would achieve the same goal that you want, but would also make women feel much more welcome back in the party.
Vin.
I want to make a couple points. I'm pro-life. I think it is a serious moral issue. I think it's a serious theoretical issue. I think it's a serious substantive issue. I think it is massively overblown as a political issue. Less than 5% of the people cast their votes in the last election based on the abortion issue. I think, and I don't dismiss or trivialize the argument that my friends here are having. I'm on one side of it. I think it is important. But the Republican Party, the worst thing about this issue from the Republican Party's standpoint is not which side we take or how we might abandon it, but how much of our energy and intellectual resources are diverted into this debate. Back to the questioner who we've now long since forgotten, the only point I would make is it's one thing to say that you may want the party to not take a strong stand on abortion. I don't necessarily agree with that, but forget that for a second. But to say you don't want the party to take a strong stand on social issues is a mistake, or at least it defines social issues improperly. I would say precisely the opposite. The Republican Party needs to spend more time talking about and developing a social philosophy. And if they do that, they will both find an electorate that's responsive to it, and they will find a lot of places where all Republicans can come together. For instance, reform of welfare policies along the lines that encourage work and encourage families to stay together in opposition to the policies that we have now, which most people really across the ideological spectrum think undermine work and undermine families as values. That's a value-oriented approach to a social policy that unites Republicans, doesn't divide them. In education, the issue of school choice may be controversial, but it unites a lot of Republicans. Libertarian Republicans say we like the idea that people can be free to choose. Social conservatives say they like the idea that families can control their children's education. If you talk about a social philosophy and seriously think about it, which is something Republicans haven't done, because our social philosophy for so long was it's not the proper role of government. And I understand that. I mean, that's sort of the theoretical tradition that I grew up in. Mickey Edwards understands that pretty well. We have to get beyond that and say, all right, there is a role for government. It does involve values and morality. And let's talk about how that affects education and health care and welfare and housing, which Jack Kemp talked about. And you'll find remarkable agreement among Republicans across the spectrum. Remarkable ability to appeal to Democrats, independents, and moderate Republicans. And then we can talk about our huge differences over this issue of abortion or gay rights or whatever. I mean, by the way, if Bill Clinton had run on the issue of gays in the military, he would have lost the election too. And it doesn't matter whether people are for or against it. They would have said that's not what the president's primary function ought to be. If the Republican Party makes a mistake of thinking that the issue of abortion or the issue of gays is the primary focus of our party, we will certainly lose, just as I think this administration is failing today in part because That's what the public thinks their primary focus is.
But Vin, we don't have to write a new social philosophy for the Republican Party.
Oh,
We
yes,
have
we
one.
do.
No.
But
In fact, you
Republicans
represent-
don't
you-
talk about it
you
enough. They don't think
represent
about it, and
You-
they don't
you
prove to
repre-
people that they care about it.
But Vin, you represent it. Empowerment. Empower America. Empowerment and the encouragement of individual responsibility. You know, it's mainstays of the
I'll
Republican
retreat in the
philosophy.
face of compliment.
Okay, empowerment and encouragement of the most insidious phrase in the last 30 years is it's society's fault. We have allowed the dialogue to be dominated by people who want to blame all of us for everything. When you start to blame society and stop encouraging individual responsibility and empowering individuals to have more control over their own lives, what you breed is the welfare mess you have, what you breed is inner city crime, what you breed is a lot of the social problems we have today. People get let off the hook. Maybe that sounds hard-hearted, but I think if you think about it, it really makes sense. Society has said it's society's fault, so therefore individuals do not take responsibility. We don't hold people accountable anymore. The Republican philosophy is one of empowerment and encouragement of individual responsibility. We have the social philosophy. We need to talk about it.
Let me just encourage a question here. Harry.
Since I've been a Republican here for 4 years, I think I now know how the French felt when the Allies landed in Normandy. But,
I hope we do as well. Thank you.
Good play.
One thing that sets apart Bill Clinton's rhetoric from that of most politicians is his constant references to common citizenship. Sorry, is there a problem with this mic?
Nope.
Common citizenship and civic virtue. His attempts to make everyone feel a part of the greater society, the greater community. And it's something that a lot of people attribute part of his success to, and something that we Republicans have really not done much with in the past, with the most notable exception of Jack Kemp. And my question is, do any of you see these attempts in the party in terms of moving towards a greater social philosophy and trying to define our vision of common citizenship and civic virtue and making people feel a part of the community?
Let me take the first cut at that to just say the thing that to me is most remarkable about Bill Clinton's rhetoric is how little it resembles his program. It's as if the 1992 campaign never happened when you look at what he proposes. But I think what you talk about is something Vin reminded me of when he was speaking a while ago. What we Republicans do a very poor job of is saying why we're for what we're for. I mean, we're not for welfare reform because we're against people on welfare. We're for welfare reform because welfare doesn't work. I mean, it has trapped millions of Americans and now actually generation after generation of Americans in a web of poverty that it's almost impossible for them to escape from. We want to reform welfare because we want those people to have a chance to control their own lives. And the same thing is true. You can talk about capital gains taxes. You can talk about school choice. You can talk about Republican strong positions on crime. I mean, the social issue that I think is absolutely the most pregnant for us politically is crime, personal security. But I think as we talk about the virtues, the common citizenship or communitarianism or whatever you want to say, what we as Republicans have not done a very good job of for some years is to put forward why we are for what we're for, why we are for low taxes, because as Vin says, it creates jobs, generates profits, protects pensions, spurs investment to again create more jobs.
The fact is we don't have an answer for young kids in the inner city schools. I had the opportunity through this program to go and teach at a junior high school. And I asked the students, what comes to mind first when I say the United States of America? The first thing was violence. Number 2 answer was drugs. And the third answer was white people. There was not a single positive voice in there. And they kept saying to me, you know, they're in 8th and 9th grade. Why should we care about this country? It doesn't care about us. You know, my brother got... And the problem is, we don't speak to that because there really is no common citizenship.
But let me just say, I'm going to have to depart, and I apologize, I'm going to have to be the first to leave. It's important, though, for when we respond to Bill Clinton, a lot of Republicans are attracted to some of his notions about civic virtue, national service, and things like that. That's understandable. It's very important that we not buy into that philosophy, in my view, which says that virtue and service are defined in terms of your relationship to the government or something you do for the government. Just in terms of social problems, for instance, I could argue to you strongly that there's nothing that would solve more social problems in this country than convincing parents to spend more time helping their kids with their homework, all right? I think that's not just rhetoric, that's really empirically almost a provable thing. and I could give you example after example after example of that. A lot of it doesn't have to do, though, with a change in a government program. And that's very difficult for people who are in government and the political process to understand. But we are the party of many things, but one of the things that does unite all of us is that we are the party that understands politics and government is not the whole world. And we think the Democrats, unfortunately, sometimes with the best of intentions, forget that. If you define merit and if you define virtue solely in terms of your response to a government initiative, you are going to fail. And we think that is the underlying reason why so many of the Democrats' social initiatives in the inner city and elsewhere have failed. And while I think it's important for our party to have and develop a social philosophy and a philosophy of activist government consistent with our values, it's also important that we not buy into a Democrat or big government or communal philosophy of virtue and sacrifice.
But it's also important to phrase what that social philosophy is in terms of human beings, not in terms of concepts, theories, ideologies, but in terms of people who walk down the streets and are threatened by crime, people who don't have a house to live in, people who don't have insulation in the houses that they have, whatever. Our solutions are different. The reason I'm a Republican is because I believe our conservative policies better address the aspirations of average citizens. But we have to learn to talk in terms of the people that we are addressing, not in terms of ideology.
Well, and I think probably one of the best ways that we can do that is to advocate non-bureaucratic, non-federal government solutions to problems. There's not just, when people say government, there are different kinds of government. There's church government, there's family government, there's local government, there's federal government. The thing about what Clinton is advocating, which is Kennedy-esque in the sense that it mimics the rhetoric of John F. Kennedy in talking about the Peace Corps and so forth, is that it does appeal to the aspirations of people to help other people, but it gives them only the avenue of federal service to do it. And I think the Republicans could trump that by taking those resources and transferring them to families instead of to bureaucracies. And let me just give you two quick examples. The first would be to radically, dramatically, and immediately increase the standard deduction for children from the current $2,300 to, say, something in the range of $8,000 to $10,000. If you did that, no family of four in America making less than $40,000 a year would pay a dime of federal income tax. Now, that is money that would be transferred from bureaucracy and from the federal government, and it would be put at a local government, primarily the family level, where, you know, the children are being fed, they're being clothed, they're being educated, they're being nurtured, and so forth. Empowering families to meet those needs instead of government employees. The second example is education vouchers. We are currently spending about $5,100 per student to educate children. And yet we know that SAT scores have declined every year over the last 30 years and so forth. And if we just took half of that money, you wouldn't have to give a parent $5,000, because a parent or a private or parochial school can educate a child much more efficiently than the government can. Just give them $2,500. And that child will be better educated. We know from a growing body of data that they'll be able to read better, they'll be able to write better, they'll be able to pick out Mexico on a map. So I think that's at least my notion of civic virtue, is doing it at the local level where it's closest to people and transferring the money that's currently flowing through bureaucracies and giving it instead to families.
If I might key off that?
Well, let's get a question first. And then.
Hi, my name's Keith Hennessy. I'm a first-year student here. I was pulled away from the California Republican Party toward Mr. Perot largely because of his deficit plan, but I was also driven away from the Republican Party by Mr. Buchanan's speech and by the social conservative issues. I'd like to hear, especially from Frank and from Mr. Barber, what you feel the relative valuations are between the Perot voters and the more socially moderate voters who seems are an important prize in the future, and the threat posed by Ms. Buchanan and Mr. Reed's coalition of we're going to take our money or our ball and go home if you pull our position out of the party.
Well, let me just say, first of all, to that the threat that they will pull their ball out and go home is a threat that's been generally manufactured by the press. I mean, what Baby Buchanan said is not that Pat Buchanan wants to support Republicans. He just says, I mean, she's making the point of what she thinks people feel about something. The fact of the matter is, a lot of the pro-life people have been the most loyal people in the Republican Party in supporting pro-choice candidates. Now that's simply a fact that you see in race after race around the United States. But that's not really what the important point is. The important point is for you and every other Republican who is out there to recognize that your voice counts in the Republican Party, that you're wanted by the Republican Party, that you don't have to pass some litmus test or you don't have to agree with Haley Barber on something to be a good Republican, and that that's not eyewash, that that's meaningful participation in our party. One of the things that we will do in the next 2 years that frankly hadn't been done much because we've had the White House for 12 years, we will be a much more participatory party. As I said at the beginning, my goal is to build this party from the bottom up, to build the state parties, to project our party away from Washington. And I can tell you in California, and Frank's going to say this, I think, the people who voted for Perot in California don't look very much like the people that voted for Perot in some other parts of the country on issues and that sort of stuff. But the people that Perot got in most of the country, the Pacific Coast and the Northeast, I think being more the exception, tended to be almost totally driven by economics. People who felt like that they had been betrayed and that they thought they were voting for small government, low taxes, less spending, and they feel like taxes went up, spending went up, regulations went up, and they didn't change their minds about what they had voted for in 80 and 84 and 88. They changed their minds about whether they thought the Republicans really believed in the things that they thought they had been voting for in 80 and 84 and 88.
May I follow up on that?
Sure, make yourself at home.
I'm just a first year, and I'm taking a negotiation analysis class. And Ms. Buchanan, your statement of about 10 minutes ago that if pro-life is taken out of the platform, we're going to leave and we're going to form a new party, that sounds like what we're taught is a threat. Is that a threat? And if not, what is it?
It's a mischaracterization of what I said. I said a third party will start. I didn't say we will start it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the way I heard her say it.
Can I make one observation?
I got a pretty good ear for this sort of stuff.
Frank obviously, as a pollster, has more to say about this than I would, but just one observation about your comment and the fact that you were pulled away or driven away from our party by that speech. And with all due respect to Pat, who is articulate and who has strong beliefs, Pat Buchanan was the candidate who was not nominated by the party. He was not the nominee of the party. He was given time to speak at the convention, and he did it articulately, expressing the views that he had, but you could have gone to the Democratic convention and found many people on the floor of the Democratic convention as delegates and prominent Democrats who would have given speeches that would have driven you even farther away. And don't base the Republican Party on what one of the defeated candidates had to say.
And I might add, I would rather be part of a party where there are people who speak at my convention with whom I disagree than to be part of a party, as there was in Madison Square Garden, where Governor Bob Casey, a devout Roman Catholic, pro-life Democrat, was excluded from the platform, the governor of the fifth largest state in America, for no reason other than the fact he was pro-life. In fact, there wasn't a single pro-life speaker at the Democratic convention in Madison Square Garden, and pro-life Democratic delegates from Minnesota suffered verbal abuse because they tried to unfurl a pro-life banner. So you don't necessarily have to agree with Pat Buchanan or Pat Robertson or Phyllis Schlafly or Bill Weld or any other Republican, but I'd rather be in a party where there's a diversity of views, where there's a patch quilt, and it's not a blanket woven from a single cloth, it's a patch quilt of different elements, and they're all represented than one party that excludes all the other views.
Just one real quick,
Okay.
just for reasons of defense here. It may upset you, but the facts are that George Bush, in 3 different national polls, picked up 10 points the night Pat Buchanan spoke, so there's quite a few American people are in total agreement with what he said. And you all forget that.
All right, let's maintain some modicum of control.
Let me just say,
Just a modicum.
what's your name again? You and the gentleman who was standing behind you, is now close to the microphone, are an example of why Republicans did lose in 1992, because you should have been with us and you weren't, because so many of you went to Ross Perot. The Perot vote was incredibly young. I know that most people think that it was an elderly vote because those were the volunteers. The fact is they were volunteers because they didn't have that much to do during the daytime.
Or the nighttime.
Perot's Perot's vote.
But,
Alienate the Perot voter.
but Frank, you also went to Ross Perot.
And I went to Ross Perot, and I left
put it all on
not
the
because
table
of
here.
Pat Buchanan's speech, I left because of George Bush's speech. And so my problem is with him, and I would say to Haley that those two gentlemen right there, and many of the women that also left of that age group, are the people that we got to track in the next 2 or 3 years. And if we focus on economic issues, to go back to the first question, I was timing it. I wanted to see how long it would take before they started to argue up here. You know, we've only got about 15, 20 minutes. We're still all friends, so that's very impressive. We have to follow you, and we have to address your concerns, and we have to bring you back into the party. And we're going to do it by economic means. I'm glad that my friend and father, Vin Weber, is not here, because he would be angry with me. Because we're going to have to show you that we are serious on the deficit more so than the Democrats, that we are serious about tax policy more so than the Democrats. We're not going to cut the programs. They're going to cut off your opportunity, but we are going to attempt to go after those programs that we do not need in Washington. And if we don't address your concerns, and if we don't reach out to you, we absolutely will lose in 94 and 96. But if you two guys are voting with us in 1996, that's enough to give us the 50+1 to win.
Yes, sir. You're up.
Yes, I'm a Republican activist here in Massachusetts, and I'm very proud to be a member of a group that I'm labeled, just like the gentleman before me called, a member of the religious right. So I do have a little problem with the party of inclusion. Ms. Stone just said that she believes in the individual's right to privacy. I also believe in that, except when the effect and cause on society is developed by that individual's right to privacy. I don't believe in Bill Clinton's slogan, "It's the economy, stupid." If I had to say it, I would say it's the culture, stupid. The problem I have with inclusion is many people like me from the religious right believe that abortion and homosexuality is evil. Now, I want to know how, if I sincerely believe it, okay, how can I be inclusive of something that I regard as evil? I would like Ms. Stone to tell me that and comment on what I said about the right to the individual's privacy, and others too, please.
Well, what I'd have to say is that there is a phenomenon all over this country called common ground. It's sprung up spontaneously all over the country. Started in Missouri, I believe, and it's in Wisconsin, California, a lot of the Midwestern states especially. The common ground movement is people from opposite sides of the abortion issue, Planned Parenthood, Right to Life Committee, who've been screaming at each other with megaphones across barricades. They finally said, you know, nothing's happening here. Women, children, whatever, no one's being helped. Lawyers and lobbyists are the only ones that are benefiting from the fight. So they sat down, spontaneously generated phenomena, and they said, what can we do to work together for programs that will really reduce the need for abortion, that will really get at, you know, the underlying cause for the need for abortion and the underlying cause for our disagreements. They have sat down, they have crafted programs, they work together now. There's a lot of things, if the goal is the same, and that's what I was saying to Bay, I think the goals within the Republican Party on the pro-choice side and pro-life side are the same. It's what we have to fight out is the best way to reach those goals, and that is to make abortion an unnecessary option for people in this country.
I don't agree totally. There is a statement of principle that we feel strongly, those who agree as the pro-life position in the Republican Party, that we must take a stand publicly that abortion is wrong, it is killing the unborn child, and that we will not ever back off that position. Now, if you say there's some programs we could work together to reduce the desire, I totally agree, and that should be done across the country. We will not win this by presidential dictate. We all accept that. But as a national party, we feel it is imperative that that party stand up for that principle and let it stand in the platform.
Let me take a whack at this question, because politics, after all, is the art of what's achievable, of what can be done, the art of the possible. And life is a series of choices. I went to the Democratic Convention at Madison Square Garden in 1992. I covered it as a television commentator. The Democratic position on abortion put forward at that convention was that they favor abortion on demand for any reason or no reason, at any time in pregnancy, paid for by the taxpayers if necessary, with absolutely no limitation or regulation whatsoever by the federal government or the state government or the local government. Now that's their position. 80% of Americans, or 85% of Americans, don't agree with that position. There are a lot of Americans who don't agree with the Republican position about abortion either. But let me just say to you, as you ponder what you're going to do politically, that you're going to have a choice between whether to support candidates or support by not voting at all, who support the position of abortion on demand for any reason or no reason any time in pregnancy, or to support Republican candidates who don't support that. I think it's very, very important that people understand in this country both sides of this issue. There are a lot of people who think they're the pro-life Republicans and everything else. The Democratic position is not just different from the Republicans. Their position is very extreme, very extreme. Ninth-month abortions, under their platform, they should be legal. Abortions for sex selection should be legal. No parental consent, no waiting periods. You know, in the end, in politics, what we have to do is choose what is better. We don't always get to choose exactly what we want, and that's probably good. And I will just say again, if we have a party where everybody agrees on everything, it's going to be a damn small party. And you can just rest assured of that.
I think that's what he was advocating now.
Ralph, did you?
Well, I guess I would address the questioner by saying the reason why you have to be inclusive is because you have to understand a political party is not a church. Its purpose is not to promulgate a doctrine of faith and enforce it. Its purpose is to put together a collection of principles and win elections based on those principles. And what you have to do is, you know, Oscar Wilde said one time, there are some people who tell you that you're going to hell in such a way that you want to get there as quickly as possible. And I think what you have to do is leave some of your rhetoric that you're used to using in a kind of a theological context and understand that politics by its very nature involves compromise. And in 1960, Martin Luther King supported the same nominee that was being supported by segregationist Lester Maddox, and Lester Maddox didn't try and kick Martin Luther King out of the party, and Martin Luther King didn't try and kick Lester Maddox out of the party. Now, Martin Luther King believed that segregation was an evil. More than that, as a clergyman and as an ordained Baptist minister, he believed it was an abomination because it denied that man had been made in God's image and denied him human rights that derive from the fact that he was made in his image. But he did not say anybody who doesn't share that view should be kicked out of the Democratic Party. He did not say that. And so that's what I think the position of people who hold your view ought to be. Hold to it, believe in it, but don't try and exclude others who disagree from a party because then you won't be able to accomplish anything.
I think it's an interesting debate. I've been active in the Republican Party a long time. Started as a young Republican, was a young Republican chairman, national vice chairman, served 16 years in Congress, attended every Republican convention for years, and I never read the Republican platform, and I don't know anybody else who did. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting that, you know, we're deciding who we're going to support based on whether or not people put this two-sentence thing in there that historians are going to reflect on some future time. I mean, I would think that perhaps you would be better off, and I think you made the point very well, not to confuse your church with the purpose of the party, either party. And when a candidate emerges, determined based on what that candidate believes, whether you support him or don't support him, or her.
What is a party if it just reads polls and then moves around those issues accordingly? The key here is you're inclusive after you establish what you believe. And you don't compromise principles at any time, not for a vote, not for a victory at the polls. You don't compromise principles, or you are nothing. You may as well be a social club.
But, Bay, the problem with that is I have been a delegate to many conventions, And a Republican National Convention is part of a winnowing out process that begins with what few activists tend to show up at a precinct meeting and are available and free the day that the county convention is held, and from there are free to take the weekend to go to the state convention, and from there are narrowed down to become the people who go to the national convention. If you are saying that is a principle shared by all the members of the Republican Party or the great majority, you've got a point. I don't think that's what a convention reflects.
Can
Let's
I
get to
just say
the-
just one quick
Yeah,
sentence?
all right.
I did read the platforms, and I do think they are important. But what I'm saying is that once you draft a platform, you shouldn't say that anybody who doesn't hold to every element is excluded. That's all I'm saying.
Mark's in my class. If I don't recognize him, he's going to kill me on the evaluation.
He gives the grades, so...
Give an F.
Well, in response, my name is Mark Hoffman. I'm a first year at the Kennedy School. In response to Mr. Luntz's report earlier, I don't think that I ran away from anything. It's that there was nothing there for me to be for or against where I was in the Republican Party. And I just want to pose this question about parties in general. When Lynn Martin was here in her study group, it took about 3 sessions, and we were trying to define what the Republican Party stood for and get a direction for it. We never got any kind of real consensus. And I just wonder, is the party dead? Is this a relic of an old system that's now, I mean, we saw 19% of the vote go another way. We only have a 54% of the general population who's even voting. Is this a system that's going to continue, or is it something that's just sort of right now continuing to grow candidates but will not really continue in the future?
You make an excellent point. The reason I believe that the party has failed nationally in the last couple of years, as I stated earlier, is because it lost its focus, it's lost its definition. People really didn't know the difference between Democrat and Republican. The issues were going back and forth, whether it be foreign policy, economic, and even sometimes on the social side of it. If we cannot define ourselves, then we cannot recruit people. I mean, it's just, unless they're just going to do it by voter registration in their congressional district. I mean, we should bring them aboard by issues. I disagree with Frank. He's a great pollster, but I happen to disagree that you go out and you attract, you say, okay, it looks like we're doing badly in the younger people. We'll give them something. We're not doing well with the ethics. We'll give them something. We bring people aboard by our principles, by our position on fiscal policy, by our positions on foreign policy, and our position on one of the greatest issues that we're facing today, and that is the value system in this country and the attack, as the gentleman back here spoke about, on culture. That's what the people are facing right now. We have to address the issues that the people in this country are facing every day. And if we think we can just skip the controversial ones and go to those that we all agree to, we are mighty mistaken if we think that's going to be a successful path.
Not that I feel like I have to defend Frank Luntz, but to answer your question more directly, although I will, to answer your question more directly, the party's been a little confused, but if we go back to the basis of what the Republican Party has always stood for, and Clinton is redefining for us, or reclarifying for us, exactly what the differences in the party is. We don't have to change what the party philosophy is. We don't have to rewrite it or anything. Clinton clearly is drawing the demarcation line. We are the party of less taxes. We are the party of less government. We don't believe government is the solution to all of society's ills. We believe it's part of the problem. Maybe it can be a facilitator in some cases, but we overall think it should be left to the private sector, to individuals. But keying off what Mickey said earlier, we do have to address the concerns of people in their everyday lives. But take national service, for example. There's a perfect example of where the party could have drawn the line and come out on the side of the good guys, and I don't think we've done enough to say this. Clinton's national service project, government make work jobs for kids during the summer. Wouldn't it have been better to give tax incentives to local businesses to provide real jobs in the private sector that would stimulate the economy and create internships for people that would turn into real jobs later? Why was the only solution for giving kids jobs during the summer to create a government job? Why? Because Bill Clinton thinks that's the only job that's good because it's the only kind of job he's ever held.
Let me just ask that these 5, and you're out of here, Mark. You're done. Let me ask these 5 questioners who are left. If you could very succinctly put your question, we'll get to it. But we're right at our deadline. So if you could each put your question we'll try to get to all 5 of them as we sum up here.
Okay, I'll try to keep this short. One of the social issues I think we haven't really covered so far has been the religious, as much as, for instance, the pro-choice, things like that. And so a question I have is about recent coverage of so-called stealth candidates doing local party activities and putting religious presence on a lot of city council, school boards, and state party organizations without necessarily having campaigned on religious issues, members of what is termed friendly the religious right. My question is mostly for Mr. Reed and Mr. Luntz for the media point of view. Is this strategy, does it risk giving an insidious image to religious candidates or to the Republican Party in general? And does it add to the party's image, which was gained partly at the convention, as getting somewhat more extremist?
All right, let's get this other question. Yeah. We're gonna answer them all in a bunch, so you guys can sit down.
My question is to Ralph Reed. I have here the Christian Coalition Congressional Scorecard. I want to talk again about the ever-touted race of Mr. Coverdale, Senator Coverdale. His stated position on choice is that he supports Roe versus Wade. He supports government staying out of the abortion decision. Your scorecard gives him 100% support of the Christian Coalition, and question number 2 has to do with abortion on demand. Why does this seem inconsistent to me?
Can you answer that real quickly?
Yes, because he signed a pledge prior to the election saying he would vote against the Freedom of Choice Act no matter how it was amended. And the Freedom of Choice Act, as was already mentioned, would repeal all state restrictions on abortion.
So when in his state position on that issue, he says that he would codify Roe with legislation.
No,
you have no trouble with that?
He says he would not codify Roe by voting
that's
for
not
the
what
Freedom
his
of Choice
position
Act.
says.
Yep, it is what his position says.
I can give you a fax.
We have two
He took both positions. What
we
else
have 2
is new?
points of view here. Right, okay. two sets of facts. I blew that one. Let's go to this gentleman here.
Yes, I'd like to thank all the Republican leadership here for coming out to joust with Mecca. Education here. And my question is along that line, what did the education president do for us in the last 4 years?
Okay. Yes, sir.
As you work to recraft the patchwork quilt of our standard, I'm curious, this is probably a question more geared towards Chairman Barber and Dr. Reed, what efforts you are undertaking to develop and nurture the next group of Republican leaders who are going to be our standard bearers.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I'm Reese Dwyer. I'm a mid-career here at the Kennedy School. Statement and a question. The statement is the Republican caucus of the Kennedy School meets Friday afternoon, 1:30 in room 380 upstairs. You're all invited. The question is, you've talked a lot about abortion, the things that divide women in this country. Frank has talked about how we've lost women, we've lost young people. Could you tell us what it is that the Republican Party has to offer young women?
All right, I think we ought to try to get to, we'll try to get to all 4 of those questions, and then I'm going to ask the chairman to kind of sum up. He opened it, we'll ask him to close it, and then we'll thank you for your patience. Who would like to take that first question with regard to the Christian Coalition and the so-called stealth candidates? Ralph, would you like to?
Yeah, we don't advocate that strategy. We don't condone it. We don't encourage it. We don't teach it. And the reason why is because we think that there is an umbilical relationship between campaigns and governing. We believe the purpose of campaigns is to build a reservoir of public support for policies that you then subsequently govern with. And if you go out and you campaign saying one thing and then seek to govern another, you will be thrown out of office as quickly as you have been thrown in. What we instead advocate through the distribution of our voter guides, which list all the candidates on a broad range of issues from taxes to social issues to foreign policy issues, is actually a policy of light. The true stealth candidates are the incumbents who vote one way in Washington, come back and campaign saying something else. So what we did in 1992 is distribute about 40 million voter guides listing where all the candidates stood on all the issues, and then let the chips fall where they may. So we're not in favor of it. We're in fact in favor of the opposite. If you're a pro-family candidate who's for limited government, lower taxes, safe neighborhoods, and schools that work, run on those issues, win on those issues, and then govern on those issues.
Let me just do a little follow-up. I'm from California, where you hear a lot of talk about the stealth candidate. Let me just explain. I was out there last summer, and there was 2 or 3 articles, headline in like page 2 and all. Christian right takes over school board. You would think it said rapists take over school. They were the first paragraph. We're watching them carefully. They may try to introduce God back into the schools. There was this panic setting in with the media that we had won a school board, we being in those who have traditional values, and it was 3-2 now, and we'd just taken it over, and there was fear amongst all right? Well, when the press is reacting like that by all you say is, yes, I go to church on Sunday, oh my gosh, not one of those guys. Well, you hesitate to make that a big issue in your campaign. You just run on what you believe. So I think that it's just a natural reaction. They're not saying they're, you know, being religious right now is a label. This is the new political way of the liberals to handle, and the press feeds this, to handle conservatives, is you label them. If they believe in this, you label them. You believe in this, you label them. I mean, if you are against affirmative action, you are definitely a racist. Call them a racist. If you believe in traditional values, you are religious right, which are kooky guys. And so that's what the response is. Some of these people are saying, I don't think I've ever told anybody that I happen to have religious beliefs. I even read the Bible once in a while. So they're hesitating to make that. This is what's happening, is they're going under, running on basic issues of the school board and winning, and then afterwards it's coming out, and that's why the press is saying they were stealth candidates, hiding the fact that they have some traditional beliefs.
I think it would be equally wrong, for example, to have a headline that says 2 Jews seeking to take over the school board. That would be wrong. Why is it wrong? Because it discriminates against people based on nothing other than their faith. We shouldn't discriminate against people based on their faith. We should only judge candidates based on their publicly stated public policy views. Vote for or against people based on their public policy views, not based on fear or ignorance about where they're coming from in terms of their personal theology.
Would someone address the question of education, and what did former President Bush do?
Not very much. The problem is that, you know, the president actually proposed a pretty good education bill.
America 2000.
And if you believe that there are serious problems in public education, I think the president, working through Lamar Alexander, did a very good job of laying out a plan that would have addressed that. He was not able to get the Congress to address it. That was part of the problem. And part of the problem, quite frankly, was that the president, on that issue, as on so many others, had a good plan, gave a good speech, and then forgot about it. And we didn't hear any more. And there was no follow-through. So I will say that during the Reagan-Bush years, there were some real efforts to improve public education. Ted Bell, when he was the Secretary of Education under President Reagan, did a very good job of trying to improve the quality of public education. There were people in the administration who tried to stop him and force cuts, but I think President Bush gets a lot of credit for what he tried to do, but he just didn't do it hard enough, and he let the ball drop, and so the question was very valid.
Mickey's right. America 2000 really was a very good plan, and in fact, what I understand from people who are now in the new Department of Education, parts of the plan will be continued.
The problem with education, if we ever ask it, is George Bush sent up his education plan, and the Senate passed Teddy Kennedy's education plan. I mean, that's just the plain literal fact of what happened. This was an area which Congress just said, you know, we're going to pass our plan. We don't care what you want, and here we go.
Let me ask this fourth question out of order so I can give the last question to the chairman. The fourth question was, what does the party offer for young Republican women?
Well, being a young Republican woman, I guess I should answer.
That's the biggest softball I touched you tonight.
Go ahead.
It offers young Republican men. That's
In that case, where do I sign up for the Democratic Party?
Of whom none showed up tonight.
That is the worst answer Vicky ever heard. As I have a problem. I'm often asked to speak about women's issues and the problem with attracting women. I have a real strong feeling that our issues are their issues. They're all the same. I have as much concern about foreign aid as I do about the economy as I do about any social issue. So when, you know, if I'm going to talk to, and I do on college campuses, to women and say, why should you cut my board? I'm going to talk about exactly the same things as I talk about to young men. It's what is it attract? Why is it attractive? I think our whole philosophy on government is better. Limited government, limited taxes. It's a very, very much pro-private sector. Any of those young women now getting into business, starting their own business. Women who want to have families. They're concerned about those children. When your first child goes to school, see how important choice in education becomes to you. It's a critical issue. It's something that you become absolutely adamant about when you recognize the poor quality of our public education here. So as they go through life and face different stages of life, I think every single stage the Republican Party offers them a great deal of support for those ideas that I think they would want to see implemented in this country.
Frank,
and now from the other side of the female spectrum here, the key word was young. And young people today, and young women, I speak at college campuses all over the country and have done seminars. I've taught over 50,000 women different skills for self-empowerment. There are three things women are looking for, and that is access, opportunity, and respect. And the problem is our party doesn't specifically, it does in general terms, as Babe rightly pointed out. You know, is there such a thing as women's issues? Well, the argument can be made both ways. But women don't see in our platform that there's a respect for young women who want opportunities, who want the ability to choose to be in the home or outside the home working. And yet many of our party policies really do offer access, especially access to opportunity. And the problem is we don't phrase it, we don't talk about it, we don't communicate it in words that they can hear or understand or that gets the message across. The last one, respect. That's where my issue causes a problem with women. And we have to find a way to demonstrate with our platform, with what our party does, that we have tremendous respect for the role that women play in society, both outside the home as well as inside. Because I think we show respect for inside the home, but it's that respect for women's role outside the home. We're now in the information age where communication and technology are the byproduct. And women, quite frankly, are the best of the species to carry that product. We have a new and expanded role in the economy, one that we deserve and one that the economy needs. And our party has to show and demonstrate that, to show women that they really do have respect for their role.
But quickly, Charlie, because I agree with that, and I also think it's being done. Lynn Martin's not in here tonight, right, Ellen? She's not here. But Lynn took a very active role as a Republican leader in attacking the glass ceiling, in trying to work to see that there were greater opportunities for women to move into positions of great responsibility, to advance. We probably have not been as good at addressing this problem in the past as we should, but in fact the Republican Party has begun to address it, Lynn Martin being one good example.
I'll tell you where I think the most difficult problem for us is we don't have the number of role models as the Democrats. There is one capable liberal woman after another in the Democratic Party who are out there talking, running for office, many of them successful, many, many more than the Republican Party has. And so I think it's quite natural that young women will look and see see that so many women who have done so well are actually in the other party, and that's something we're going to have to all work on.
Real quick, Frank.
Yeah, 'cause I know what you're going to ask the final question to Haley, and I wanted to take one crack at it first because
Well,
the last 3 months here, please give me a chance.
It's your last.
Quite literally it is. One of the problems with Republicans in reaching out to young people is that we don't have enough Republican professors. There are not enough Republicans that are teaching. I know I've been around here and I found a few in the faculty at Harvard, and maybe if Clinton can depreciate some more people down to Washington, you might get a few more Republicans here. But the fact that Haley and Ann and the panelists here have come up here is one very important way that we can reach out to you, is each of you can choose a role model from these panelists up here. And the other way is by encouraging you all to run. If you're angry and upset and pissed off and you're Republican, come to us and we will help you. Come see me in my office. I'm here for another month. I mean, seriously, if you don't run and you don't get involved and all you do is bitch and complain, you've got no one else but yourself to blame. So if you really want to make a difference, if you want us to help foster you, you all got to run, and we'll be there.
Actually, the last question really was the questioners, and it was about the development of leadership, which the Kennedy School and the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are all vitally interested in. The question was really, what is the party doing to develop leadership? You're at a place where we care about politics and we care about people getting into public service. The folks here at this school are smart enough to be doing anything in this university, and they're
for was the means of developing the next generation
exactly.
of leadership.
I'm just about there.
Not from 1996, but 2004, 2008.
If you can just be a little patient, we'll get there. And if you could address that question about what is happening in terms of developing that next generation of leadership in your party, and then use that to kind of handle your closing remarks.
More than one of the people on the panel and some in the audience have spoken about role models. I think one of the weaknesses we do have as a party is there are a lot of very attractive, articulate, effective spokesmen in our party who also are outstanding political leaders who are women, or who are black, or who are Hispanics, or are Asians. And and again, it's part of the product of having the White House for 12 years. When you have the White House in the eyes of the country, you have a spokesman. You know, Ronald Reagan is the Republican Party, and the Republican Party is Ronald Reagan when he's president. And I think one of the problems we suffer from today in definition of our party is that George Bush, who's an honorable and good man who wanted to do the right thing, had a Democratic Congress the whole time to deal with, and he felt like the best way to try to deal with them was to compromise with them. And that we had a situation where you didn't get the definition and the clarity of what Republicans wanted to do that you did with Reagan. I told President Bush one time, after a while, I thought that maybe we'd learn that trying to compromise with that Congress was like paying the cannibals to eat you last. But he did with a very antagonistic Democratic Congress feel like the only approach that he had was to compromise. Of course, the 1990 budget deal was a compromise that hurt him worse politically than almost any compromise we've seen from a president in my adult lifetime. But when you have the president becomes the personification of the party. Now that we're out of the White House, it's crucial that as our party is participatory and that it is dealing with issues and policy issues in a serious way, that we allow some of the people who really are outstanding spokesmen and can be role models to get to the microphone, to chair the meetings, to have a chance to speak, to have a chance to be seriously involved in policy. And there are a tremendous number of young people, of women, of Hispanics and blacks and Asian Americans. It devolves to me to do that. And frankly, you will see, I hope if I am invited back a year from now, that you will be able to see the difference in doing that. But important to letting people have the microphone and creating role models is for us to offer people a vision, a reason to be Republicans. Two or three people have implied, or I've inferred from what you've said, one of the great problems for 1992 is you didn't feel like anybody gave you a reason to vote for the Republicans. And I will tell you that I sensed that the whole time, that this was a campaign in a year where we just simply didn't give anybody a reason to be for us. And we've got to give people a reason to be for us. And the best reason for you, I'm not that much older than you, those of you who are students here. The reason, whether you're a man or a woman or whatever your race or your religion, the Republican Party stands for opportunity. There's a very serious difference in what the Democrats think the role of government is in life and what the Republicans think. And our whole philosophy is based on opportunity. That if the government takes a greater and greater portion of what you earn and has a greater and greater control over your personal life, your business, the economy in which you work, you're going to have less opportunity. That the way that you can have the most opportunity, that you can prosper, millions of American women entered the workforce in the last 15 years, and many, many of them have gone up the managerial ladder, not nearly as far as we will see in the next 15 years, but the fact of the matter is there's tremendous opportunity for success, financial, but also personal rewards came into being for a lot of young people while Ronald Reagan and George Bush were president. We think if you'll take the time to compare what we propose and what the Democrats propose, that you will see that if you're young, if you're willing to work hard, that our party offers a system that gives you more opportunity to make the most out of what you can be. Our party doesn't offer to make you anything. We're not going to force anybody to make you be anything or to hold any job. Because by doing that, when you quota in, you quota out. When government controls, it limits. And we want to offer you an opportunity of a world where there are not limits, where you're only limited by your ability and your willingness to work and your effort. That's the very fundamental, basic difference. And you're going to see more and more in this Clinton administration that their idea is let the government make the decision. Government can make better decisions. We believe you can make better decisions. We believe that you individually and you by what you accomplish collectively will produce more good for more people more often than anything that the government can ever do. So what I say to you, I come from a party that wants to reach out to you and offer you opportunity. We can't make you anything, but we can make sure that government gives you a chance to be what you can be.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Haley. And the invitation is out a year from now. We hope you come back. And those of us who care about improving politics wish you the very best of luck in a real tough job. And we hope to have you back and hear a success story in the next year. Will you join me in thanking our panel who really went out of their way to be with us? Thank you very much. We went over, but you know we had.
on one of the greatest issues that we're facing today, and that is the value system in this country and the attack, as the gentleman back here spoke about, on culture. That's what the people are facing right now. We have to address the issues that the people in this